Okay, hi fourth grade students. It's awesome that we're finally getting started with all of this. So a few times throughout the week I'm going to be posting some videos with Read Aloud, so it'll be just like it was in the classroom, no different. You'll see here this is just office here at my mom's house. It's where I am. In the suburbs, so I'll be posting from here, so you guys will kind of get used to this little scenery. Before you ask, yes, that is a picture of me and my brothers from when we were little. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Starting on Wednesday, like I posted, I will be doing some instructional videos, mostly just review this week, and then next week we'll start full force, just like as if we were in the classroom, okay? So right now I'm just gonna get started with a Holes read aloud that I'm gonna do today and tomorrow. Try and do like 1 to 2 chapters each day, almost every day, moving forward, okay? So where we left off, which it's been a while, if you remember in our story, we have our main character, Stanley Elnatz, and right now he's at this camp, rather than going to the, like, juvie, okay, so prison for younger people, because he got caught stealing those famous shoes, okay, or stealing. He says they just fell out of the sky, okay? So remember our book does a little bit of flashbacks, okay? It goes to the past where it talks about Kissing Kate Barlow and about Stanley's no good, dirty, rotten, pig-stealing great-great-grandfather that has cursed him with bad luck, okay? So just keep that in mind when I'm reading. It has those periodically flashbacks, okay? And then where we left off, we had Stanley and Zero. So Zero ran away, okay, from the camp, and Stanley ended up running away too, and he ended up finding him. But you know, they're in the desert. They're not gonna last long out there. So right now we're kind of just following along with the adventure for what's gonna happen next. Okay, so they're trying to climb to the top of the mountain that looks like God's thumb. Okay, so if you remember the old story that Stanley's no good, dirty, rotten, pig stealing great-great-grandfather used to tell, was that he needed to climb to the top of that mountain in order to get good luck, or in order to not be cursed, okay? So that's why Stanley's like, I think we should just go to this mountain. Like, I remember that from the stories. This used to be an actual green lake. Now it's a desert. It's all dried up. So he's just kind of going with his gut right now and trying to help out Zero to hopefully find, some water or something up there, something that can help them, okay? So that's kind of where we left off there. They're at the mountain right now. Chapter 37. We're almost there, said Stanley. He could see the base of the mountain. Now that they really were almost there, it scared him. Big Thumb was his only hope. If there was no water, no refuge, then they'd have nothing, not even hope. There was no exact place where the flat land stopped and the mountain began. The ground got steeper and steeper, and then there was no doubt that they were heading up the mountain. Stanley could no longer see Big Thumb. The slope of the mountain was in the way. It became too steep to go straight up. Instead, they zigzagged back and forth, increasing their altitude by small increments every time they changed directions. Patches of weeds dotted the mountainside. They walked from one patch to another, using the weeds as footholds. As they got higher, the weeds got thicker. Many had thorns, and they had to be careful walking through them. Stanley would have liked to stop and rest, but he was afraid they'd never get started again. As long as Zero could keep going, he could keep going too. Besides, he knew they didn't have much daylight left. As the sky darkened, bugs began appearing above the weed patches. A swarm of gnats hovered around them, attracted by their sweat. Neither Stanley nor Zero had the strength to try to swat at them. How are you doing? Stanley asked. Zero pointed, thumbs up. Then he said, if a gnat lands on me, it will knock me over. Stanley gave him some words. B-U-G-S, he spelled. So if you remember, before Zero ran away, Stanley was helping teach him how to read, okay? So they were working on the alphabet, spelling, reading, writing, okay? And then in exchange, Zero was digging part of Stanley's hole every day, okay? So he's trying to kind of distract him with how he's feeling right now by giving him some words he can spell out and things like that. Zero concentrated hard, then said, "Boogs." Stanley laughed. A wide smile spread across Zero's sick and weary face as well. "Bugs," he said. "Good," said Stanley. "Remember, it's a short U if there's no E at the end." Okay, here's a hard one. How about Lunch? Lun. Suddenly, Zero made a horrible, wrenching noise as he doubled over and grabbed his stomach. His frail body shook violently, and he threw up, emptying his stomach of the sploosh. And now, if you remember, sploosh was what Zero called this substance-like thing that was in that canoe that he was hiding under, that little boat that Stanley had found him under, okay? It was, they don't really know, kind of rotted food, but it was all that was really out there, so they ate it. They said it tasted really sweet. It was in glass containers, and some of you guys made a prediction that maybe it was those peaches from back in the day, okay, that Kiss and Kate Barlow used to make and give out, okay, that a lot of people would buy from her, okay, before she was bad. He leaned on his knees and took several deep breaths. Then he straightened up and continued going. The swarm of gnats stayed behind him, preferring the contents of Zero's stomach to the sweats on the boys' faces. Stanley didn't give him any more words, thinking that he needed to save his strength. But at about 10 or 15 minutes later, Zero said, "Lunch." As they climbed higher, the patches of weeds grew thicker, and they had to be careful not to get their feet tangled in thorny vines. Stanley suddenly realized something. There hadn't been any weeds on the lake. "Weeds and bugs," he said. I wonder if there's weeds, okay, which is like, the plants that grow from grass, okay, or around plants, and bugs. What type of environmental factors might be around if you're coming across weeds? Remember, plants and grass need water to grow. Where do bugs typically hang out? Gnats, those little nasty bugs, okay? So all these are kind of foreshadowing what might come next, what they might find. "Weeds and bugs," he said. "There's got to be water around here somewhere. We must be getting close." A wide, clown-like smile spread across Zero's face. He flashed the thumbs-up sign, and then he fell. He didn't get up. Stanley bent over him. "Come on, Zero," he urged. "We're getting close. Come on, Hector. Weeds and bugs, weeds and boogs." Stanley shook him. "I've already ordered your hot fudge sundae," he said. "They're making it right now." Zero said nothing. Chapter 38. Stanley took hold of Zero's forearms and pulled him upright. Then he stooped down and let Zero fall over his right shoulder. He stood up, lifting Zero's worn-out body off the ground. He left the shovel and sack of jars behind as he continued up the mountain. Zero's legs dangled in front of him. Stanley couldn't see his feet, which made it difficult to walk through the tangled patches of weeds and vines. He concentrated on one step at a time, carefully raising and setting down each foot. He thought only about each step and not the impossible task that lay before him. Higher and higher he climbed. His strength came from somewhere deep inside him and also seemed to come from the outside as well. After focusing on Big Thumb for so long, it was as if the rock had absorbed his energy and now acted like a kind of giant magnet, pulling him toward it. After a while, he became aware of a foul odor. At first, he thought the smell was coming from Zero, but it seemed to be in the air, hanging heavy all around him. He also noticed that the ground wasn't as steep anymore. As the ground flattened, a huge stone rose up ahead of him, just barely visible in the moonlight. It seemed to grow bigger with each step he took. The stone no longer resembled the thumb. He knew he'd never be able to climb it. Around him, the smell became stronger. It was the bitter smell of despair. Even if he could somehow climb Big Thumb, he knew he wouldn't find water. How could there be water at the top of a giant rock? How could there be water at the top of the giant rock? The weeds and bugs survived only by an occasional rainstorm, like the one he had seen from camp. Still, he continued toward it. If nothing else, he wanted to at least reach the thumb. He never made it. His feet slipped out from under him. Zero's head knocked against the back of his shoulder as he fell and tumbled into a small, muddy gully. As he lay face down in the muddy ditch, he didn't know if he'd ever get up again. He didn't know if he'd even try. Had he come all this way just to... You need water to make mud. He crawled along the gully in the direction that seemed the muddiest. The ground became gloppier. The mud splashed up as he slapped the ground. Using both hands, he dug a hole in the soggy soil. It was too dark to see, but he thought he could feel a tiny pool of water at the bottom of his hole. He stuck his head in the hole and licked the dirt. He dug deeper, and as he did so, more water seemed to fill the hole. He couldn't see it, but he could feel it. First with his fingers, then with his tongue. He dug until he had a hole that was about as deep as his arm was long. There was enough water for him to scoop out with his hands and drop on Zero's face. Zero's eyes remained closed, but his tongue poked out between his lips, searching for the droplets. Stanley dragged Zero closer to the hole. He dug and then scooped some more water and let it pour out of his hands into Zero's mouth. As he continued to widen his hole, his hands came across a smooth, round object. It was too smooth and too round to be a rock. He wiped the dirt off of it and realized it was an onion. He bit into it without peeling it. The hot, bitter juice burst into his mouth. He could feel it all the way up to his eyes, and when he swallowed, he felt its warmth move down his throat and into his stomach. He only ate half, and he gave the other half to Zero. Here, eat this. What is it? Zero whispered. A hot fudge sundae. Okay, so I'm going to stop there. That was 2 chapters, so that means I'll probably read 2 or 3 tomorrow. Just depends on the length of them. And then after or when I post these videos, I'll also leave like a little response box with probably 1 to 2 questions about the chapters that I read, so that way you guys can respond to them, okay? I expect you to respond to them after you watch the read aloud every time, okay? And I know that it's going to take a little while as people start getting their technology and learning how to log on and all that good stuff, which is fine. But starting next week, I will be taking points, every day to make sure you guys are doing this again, a little bit of participation in, okay? So that's where we're going to stop today. They made it up to the mountain, found a little bit of water, and found some onions to eat. Ooh. But think about that. If you hadn't eaten in a few days, would you bite into a raw onion? Maybe, if you're that hungry, right? That's starving. Only thing you can find. So, all right, guys. So I will post the next video tomorrow. Have a good rest of your night, and keep up with your study island and IXL for the time being.